What's the number one challenge for businesses today?
Workforce development, attracting, recruiting, and retaining people.
And that's why we created this podcast, designed for the frustrated CEO, the under-resourced recruiter, or the overworked manager, to give you the tools to tackle those WTF moments.
It's time to open another workforce therapy file. Welcome back to the 6th episode of Workforce Therapy Files, also known as WTF. Can we say that? Yes, we can. This episode is on numbers, and we've got some pretty cool information for you guys. Jamie, Jason, and I doing some research and really thinking about where we are from a recruiting and economic standpoint right now and what the numbers really mean. So this episode, we're going to be talking about why is it important? What difference does it make what these numbers are? For reference, we are looking at the article that was released by the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics on October the 6th. So the most recent data that we have to point in reference. So Jason, do you want to talk us through some numbers and get us going? Now, for the math nerds out there, I am not one of those, and I helped with a lot of these numbers, so don't judge us. Is that fair, guys?
Yeah, so the jobs report comes out periodically. The government releases a set of numbers, tables. It's really interesting when you dig in to all of it. But we're going to highlight a few of the ones that we see as most important. First of all, the number of new jobs created was double in this period what was expected by the economists. So that's interesting. It could be good for the economy.
Sounds good.
Sounds great. It doubled. But it could also be bad if you're the one trying to recruit and there's more competition out there. Mm-hmm. So we'll keep that in mind. Another really interesting number is the average hourly wage, which went up from 27.85 this time last year to 29.06. That number may feel a little high if you're in a market like Alabama. It may feel a little more right or even a little low if you're maybe somewhere like California. So keep in mind that you can drill way down into these numbers, and your local or regional workforce development team could probably help you really find more accurate numbers for your market. So most areas of the country do have some sort of workforce development team, that board or a team that works with them to really what they do is they're really good at data. They're really good at analyzing the data and helping you understand what kind of pivots you need to make. So make use of that. That's in many markets that's available. Another number we hear a lot is unemployment rate. Unemployment rate has been the measure of our economy for generations. If the unemployment rate is low, things are good. Well, at the time of this recording, it's 3.8%, which is a historic low. That sounds great. Another number that sounds really good and is good for the economy. But we need to understand what unemployment rate means. So unemployment rate represents individuals who are available and actively looking for work in the past month. So no employment, they're laid off, they're actively looking. So that's what unemployment rate means. What we find, and we discussed this at length today to try to get to kind of how we feel. None of these numbers are perfect, by the way. They're all kind of squishy and blurry. But participation rate is a much more interesting number. And I'm sure most of you out there have heard about it. Maybe you understand it. Maybe you use it. But participation rate is the percent of the population either working or actively looking for work. And that is 62.8% at last report, but it's been hovering around 60 for the past year or so. Kind of post-pandemic, it's been sitting there. So when you think to yourself, okay, so 62% of the population who can work are working, that's a problem. And it's a red flag. But there are many reasons, and we can talk about those in a minute. But what we do know is that workforce is getting squeezed. So it's getting smaller and smaller. Boomers are retiring earlier. Some of the younger generations are working differently, and we need to take that into account. So participation rate is one that is also seasonally adjusted. So, yeah, Jamie.
So it sounds like we've got more jobs and we have less people to fill
Mhm.
those jobs. That's basically what you're saying.
That's what this report said.
Yep.
Yep.
Well, I would like to say that it was probably 10, 12 years ago, and I was recruiting for architects and engineers, and those positions in particular was a huge shortage of candidates. And if you go back to the enrollment for the colleges and universities that have areas of expertise in architecture and engineering, the enrollment rate was so down. So the fact of certain positions where you're looking for degreed professionals with experience, you've got to understand too that this is something that's been a ripple effect for many years. Many organizations didn't recognize the shortage of the workforce that we were going to see, and now it's just continuing to double.
Mhm.
So it's not so much people just aren't making more humans.
That's right.
We're having less and less humans. And how many families do you know that are, dual income, no kids? For folks are just having one kid instead of, my mom is one of 4, my dad is one of 5. I mean, you're talking about generations that have gone from multiples to 1 or 2.
We could have a whole episode about population changes. I find that stuff fascinating.
Same.
It's pretty cool. But back to workforce.
Yes. Well, the only reason our population in the United States is currently growing is the immigrant
Mhm.
influx, and that's been really a savior for our workforce. So that's something we're going to talk about a little bit today. But let's get into what it means. What it means for 2 different groups, 2 different audiences for this podcast: the C-suite or the leader, and how you're building your policy and your culture, and also the actual recruiter, the talent acquisition team that are in the trenches. How you approach this. So, Molly, you want to go first, or Jamie, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'm going to let Jamie take this one first.
All right. Jamie's going to talk about leadership.
Yep. So one of the things that came out of the jobs report that I thought was pretty fascinating was that 400,000 more people this year than last year have part-time jobs as well as full-time jobs. That's 400,000 more people have made that choice.
I think that's a positive thing. I think that says something for the talent acquisition teams out there, that they are slowly adjusting to the new reality and understanding that sometimes you have to break a position up into, a full-time position into multiple part-time positions. Do you feel like that's the
I
case?
absolutely think so. But I have also worked places that would never hire part-time staff.
How short-sighted.
Well, and I think part of it is because it does require management and intentionality. So for leaders, a couple of things. If the role can be split into less hours than full-time, it is a good time to consider that. You also need to consider that flexible work in terms of location or hours is still something that individuals are looking for, and probably because now we're also complementing that full-time job. Inflation is still a big concern on people's minds. In fact, I saw a meme the other day that said, for Black Friday, can we all accept that we all have TVs and make groceries the Black Friday deal?
Yeah.
And I think that is a little tongue-in-cheek, but I think it's definitely representative of what people are experiencing.
Can I say something about the job sharing piece?
Say whatever you want.
The
It's your show.
400,000. Yeah, it's my show too.
That's right.
So, I think that what's interesting about that is when we talk about marketing, because that's what I do.
Mhm.
You're
We weren't
still
talking about marketing though.
whoops. I thought we were. So
He's like, speaking of marketing.
Speaking of marketing,
Derail.
marketing, when you're doing these, when you are splitting a position up, same thing for the screenings. Every aspect of that. If you have 10 full-time roles and you're splitting them up into 3 part-time roles per, that's 30 humans, as
Yeah.
you put it, we're hiring.
Yeah.
So you have to think about that. Your marketing spend will likely be more to reach 30 people than it's going to be to
Absolutely.
reach 10. So be prepared to spend more on the front end, but you're going to keep people engaged longer, right?
Yes.
And how cool, from my point of view, to have the diversity of thinking of 2 to 3 people per one position versus one set of eyes and one brain on a project.
Absolutely.
I see the
Absolutely.
benefit of
And
that.
when one leaves, it's not as big of a hit.
That's right.
You can absorb that a little easier. So,
Yeah,
there are some definite back end advantages there.
I love that.
Okay.
Other considerations that we've seen companies, and Jason, you've got Crowd South has a couple of clients that have added transportation to their offerings for individuals so that rural communities can make sure they have the right amount of headcount too. Bless you, Molly.
Absolutely. And it makes it's a logistical, on the front end, it's a lot of logistics, especially in rural markets. But once it's set, it's done. It's just an upfront thing. And then you have it figured out. And then you really open up the market, especially when you talk about new Americans who may not have transportation, or people who maybe don't have, reliable transportation. You're really opening it up to some great candidates that otherwise may not be able to participate.
And here's a challenge that I have for the leaders across. One of the projects that I'm working on right now is specific to transportation and the value of helping individuals find gainful employment outside of their bus range travel is so beneficial to the employer. So let me deep dive into that for the leaders. If you've got an area of your town where it takes more than 45 minutes to an hour to take public transportation to get to your location, I challenge you to figure out an internal logistics program to transport those individuals from where they live to your organization. And I would be willing to bet lots of dollars that you're going to get that return so much faster. Now, I'm not saying enable these individuals for lifetime transportation, but give them an understanding of, let's say that it's 90 days where you're going to offer them transportation at no additional cost to get them to work on the other side of town that takes less than an hour for them to get there.
Yeah.
Amen. And I'll say this too. I had an experience where we were working with a client who had a public transportation system, and we were looking at how to market that. And I went and rode buses for an afternoon, and those routes in most cities and towns do not work for workforce.
No.
They'll get you to the grocery, they'll get you to the mall, they'll get you to
Laundromat.
church, the laundromat, those things. But you have to understand that, like Molly said, it might take you an hour to get there. You can't get up at 4 a.m. to get to your 8 o'clock job and then get home at 8 o'clock at night when you leave at 5. That you'll find another job.
And you can't afford to move because the wages that are getting paid do not subsidize what it is that it's going to take for you to live in the area in which the jobs are located.
Ooh, I'm starting to see commuting subsidy start to come up. Hey, I haven't seen that. So other things for leaders to consider is thinking about having, and we've talked about this on other episodes, but having a regular wage review so that you are paying attention to, Jason mentioned earlier, there's this national shift of almost $2 more an hour. That's a pretty big shift in a year. So what is it in your area and in your industry, and paying attention to that so that you are creating meaningful plans and aren't surprised by the lack of individuals that are available based on what you pay. The other thing is we're on the verge of individuals having to pay back their student loans themselves. So offering tuition repayment support can be a really meaningful way. It doesn't mean you have to pay off everything. You didn't incur all those student loans. But if you can add it as a benefit and reach somebody where they need it most, that can definitely be a game changer for the individuals that receive it. And the big thing that I want to emphasize is that as leaders, you have the opportunity and the responsibility to review your policies that either enable the ability to recruit appropriately or actually work against it. You have the awesome responsibility of paying attention to the culture that you're building around meeting employees where they are so that they can do good and great things. You also have the ability to prepare to do good and great things. So spend some time talking to your recruiters, care about their experience, care about the feedback that candidates are offering so that you are keeping your policies relevant for what the workforce needs.
Yeah, it's so important to stay in communication because you as a leader, your most valuable asset is your workforce. And when you consider, what we just talked about with that average hourly wage increasing about $2, that is a huge percentage of an expense. That's
It's almost 10% when you're
oh,
looking
it's
in the
trimming
20s.
off the bottom line, and that's hard. And even for a public company, I mean, you've got to scrape and claw to get those gains, and so you don't want to be losing it with something you can control,
Yeah.
because you can offer, even if you can't match the pay increases, you can do other things through benefits, through transportation, through childcare, all those things that matter. But asking what matters to your employees, that's what's so important. If you're asking your recruiting team what they're hearing, and then the recruiting team asking in the interviews, asking the workforce out on the floor, like, what is important to you?
Yeah.
That's where the magic
It's a great
happens.
segue into this awesome list that Molly's prepared for. Molly, when I was thinking back to when I first got started helping doing recruiting work, I remember people talking about the unemployment rate and feeling like I should have a reaction to it and not knowing what to do differently. It was like, well, I'm still going to post this and I'm still going to look at the folks who apply and I'm still going to push forward the people I think are great. Like, I'm not going to do anything differently regardless of what that unemployment rate is. I'm just going to either have more to look at or less to look at. So what would, hindsight being what it is,
Yeah.
what are the things that you would tell individuals who are maybe starting their career or currently have talent acquisition responsibilities? What should they do with the information that we've covered?
I think one of the biggest things that everyone thinking of being a recruiter or are currently there and have been there for a couple of years, these numbers are imperative to being heard. Let me explain. If you don't understand how the unemployment rate or the participation rate affect the jobs that you're recruiting for, you very rarely can speak to the leaders as far as what you need. Because the value of understanding the candidate feedback, this job doesn't pay enough, these hours aren't the right hours that I can work, making accommodations for individuals for job sharing and things like that, if you don't have the numbers to back up the words that you're using, it's just an opinion. But if you have both the opinion and the numbers, the ability to make change within your organization is how that's going to be driven.
Mm-hmm.
So as a recruiter, you may think, well, I'm just doing these screens. I'm not making a difference. I'm not doing the thing, but you really are. You're at the forefront of an organization's ability to see behind the veil and make real change and lead the way to innovation of how we can fill these positions with top talent that are in a way to add value to the company and to the individual. So to the recruiters out there, I challenge you to learn these numbers, to stay abreast of these numbers, but even more so, Jamie, you were talking just a minute ago about the your wage and salary survey. And I even want to talk through that of how a recruiter should be looking at those numbers, especially today. The relevance of this a few years from now, hopefully will not be, but when you're thinking about the industry that you're recruiting for, knowing who your competitors are within a 60-mile radius, no matter how big or small, knowing what they're paying, why people would go to them versus you, and not only that, but the scope of those companies. For example, we are a big hub here in Louisville, Kentucky for UPS logistics. There are several organizations in this community within a 60-mile radius of UPS hub there at the airport that would be competitors from a talent acquisition perspective for that work. One of the things to consider from a recruiting standpoint is, does your organization fit against that competitor? So if you're a small logistics company and looking to fill a coordinator position, well, a coordinator with a small to medium-sized company and a trucking logistics company is going to look a lot different than UPS. So you need to make sure that you have the weighted variance of what that is and the knowledge, skills, and abilities-based difference of what it's going to take to be successful. And here's something fun fact for you. If you can figure out a way to be a feeder for UPS in some of those positions or any other big conglomerate that's within your community, make those relations happen. So you may be the organization that is feeding a large organization with top talent, But imagine what you can do in building those consistencies with those positions and then growing another organization as a tier 1, tier 2 supplier. So it's not just about filling a position. You need to know statistically what you're going up against, how you're going up against them, and a knowledge base to take back to your senior leaders of how you can become more competitive. I know that we talked a little bit about transportation, but really understanding the benefits of what the worker that's coming to you will be attracted to. We've got an organization that we work with, and the employees, now get this, the employees that take advantage of their cell phone plan, there is an over 60% higher retention rate than those that don't.
Cell phones have gotten expensive.
For a cell phone plan.
I'm saying.
You wouldn't even think, that would be something. But when you look at the dollars of the unemployment rate and what it is that we're going up against, especially within our local community, but nationally with the jobs that we recruit for within Incipio, you're going into those markets and you have to know that economic standard for each industry that you're going in to recruit for.
Yeah,
now I feel like I'm on a soapbox. Sorry, guys.
No, they're making that dollar go further.
That's right.
That's a lot of what we're talking about, is trying to make sure that you're meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, when Jason talked about the number of jobs that are available and the number of people who aren't, the competition just gets steeper.
Yeah.
Right?
It's crazy.
And so we have to make sure that we're focused on these things. And I love this cell phone thing because, going out and being a self-employed individual, going and get my own cell phone after having it covered, I was like, when did it get so expensive to buy a phone?
Yeah. How many people can you have on your plan, and let's share?
That's right. Absolutely.
And another big thing that a lot of recruiters, in my experience, they get so head down and blinders on just to fill the seat with the talent that they can find. They don't ask specific questions. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about questions that are going to get you thrown into a court and you have to defend yourself as to why you ask those questions. I'm talking about questions as far as, what do you need to be successful in this role outside of knowing what to do to be successful for this position? Mm-hmm. So pay, the hours that you're going to work, the days that you're going to work, what are your childcare from a perspective of what would be a benefit? Not if you have children, not if you have backup childcare. You can't ask those questions. But if someone says, if this were a benefit, that would be another deciding factor. Because here's a fun fact for you, recruiters and senior leaders. Everybody is equally judging the other to understand if they want to work for that company.
Yeah.
The candidate and the recruiter for the company. You have to constantly look at both sides of that fence to stay competitive. Because on average, and I know I've said this before, but essential workers apply for up to 10 positions at any given time. So speed to market to respond to those individuals and understanding the value of where they would fit from those positions is going to be key to the success of any potential small to medium-sized growth company.
Gosh, that was so good.
Beautifully said.
Ding!
Well, and so we looked at it from a recruiter's perspective. We've looked at it from the leadership's perspective, but there's something between there because those two groups need to be talking, right?
Absolutely.
And so what often happens is leadership casts a vision. Here's what needs to get done. Talent acquisition says, okay, we'll go get it done. But in between there lie all these numbers that could be guiding you. I would encourage both sides of that fence to go back to your workforce strategy, annual, quarterly strategy, however you do it. If you don't do it, you should be doing it, and factor these numbers in because they play a major role in how you're going to execute your plan. If participation rate drops, you're going to react differently than if it rose. And so you need to be prepared to spend money in different places, to adjust your policies and your culture in different places. A company doesn't start overnight. Amazon wasn't just Amazon one day. It didn't just come out of thin air. So Apple didn't just appear. These companies develop and morph and form just like anything else. So consider that you're molding your company right now. This is your post-COVID company.
Absolutely.
And maybe it's going to look different next year. Maybe it's going to look different next quarter. But don't be stagnant and don't stay still, because that's how you continue falling behind.
And make sure that any policies or practices that you change, that you are preparing leaders for those changes so that they can execute it in a way that is employee-centric and still production-focused.
Yeah, and they speak about it publicly, and they
Absolutely.
promote it.
And they
because
support
that's-
it.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yep.
And
That they believe in it.
I think that would be a true definition of working smarter, not harder. If you know how many positions that you really have open to fill, and you can solidify those numbers with the standing of your current turnover, the unemployment rate, the percentage rate, all of those numbers included, as a recruiter, you can arm your senior leaders and earn your seat at the table to defend the why and placing individuals that are the right fit for the position to eliminate so many of these things.
I love it.
And I'm going to challenge any listeners out there who hear all of this and say, when am I going to find time to do that? Put on your calendar next week a 30-minute meeting to just sit and think about this with your peers on your team.
Or listen to this together.
Or listen to this
It's
as
30
a group.
minutes.
Forward
Yeah.
this. If you're a recruiter, forward this to your leadership. If you're leadership, forward this to your recruiters. Start a conversation about how you can work together to combat some of these environmental challenges that just feel so like it's an uphill battle. You're never going to get there, but you can. You just have to start chipping away at it.
And I'd like to add one more quick thing before Jim hits the button, because he looks like he's ready to. If you are like me and you're in the spot in your career where these numbers, while you may understand it while listening to the podcast, if you would rather sit down and talk about what it means for your organization, our contact information and our LinkedIn information is in the show notes. So please reach out to us, because we are very interested in helping you have these conversations.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to close another file today. I hope you enjoyed. Numbers are not always fun, but we were trying to give you a few tips and tricks to kind of work around some of the things that are happening around us. So as we close this file, again, like Jamie said, please reach out. Jamie is Parcel.
Mhm.
Molly is Incipio Works, and I'm Crowd South. And thank you for joining us once again.
Jim, close that file. Thanks for listening to the Workforce Therapy Files. We hope you learned something new, and we're thankful for the time that you spent with us today. If there's a topic you'd like us to discuss, reach out to us. Our contact information is listed in the show notes. Until next time, keep your head up.